The heart of sweet Auburn pulsed under a humid Atlanta summer sky, where the scent of cornbread and collard greens drifted from Mama's kitchen, mingling with the soft strum of a guitar from a nearby porch. The street was alive with the chatter of neighbors' kids weaving through the crowd with sweet tea in hand, and the faint hum of a gospel tune spilling from a radio. Murals of civil rights heroes adorned the brick walls, their colors vivid against the golden glow of dusk. This was no neon-lit maze of secrets. It was a community woven from history, where every corner held a story. At the center of it all stood the sweet Auburn Cultural Hub, a modest building with clay-red walls and windows framed by sweetgrass baskets. Tonight it was lit up for a fundraiser, its doors open to anyone fighting to keep its legacy alive. Zora Neale Ellison, 28, stood on a makeshift stage inside the hub, her linen blouse the color of Savannah clay, her curls tied high with a rust-red scarf. Her hands gripped a microphone, her voice steady as she delivered a spoken-word poem, each word a brushstroke, painting the resilience of her people. From Gullah shores to Auburn streets, we rise, we root, we bloom, she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd, elders nodding, kids clapping, neighbors swaying. Zora was no stranger to this stage. By day, she taught children to paint their history, filling the hub's walls with images of ancestors and Lowcountry tides. By night, she fought to keep the hub standing against developers circling like vultures. Her mother, Malene, was fading, her heart weakened by years of stress, and the medical bills were a tide Zora couldn't outrun. The hub was her anchor, her fight, her home. The crowd erupted as she finished, but Zora's smile faltered when she spotted him across the room. Malachi Reed leaned against a wall. His linen shirt rolled at the sleeves, his presence as out of place as a storm cloud in July. At 35, he was all sharp angles and quiet power, 6'1", with deep brown eyes that held a weight she couldn't read. His reputation preceded him, a real estate developer whose projects turned historic neighborhoods into glass and steel boutiques. Word was, his company, Reed Ventures, had its sights on sweet Auburn's land, threatening the hub and the small businesses that defined the street. He'd shown up tonight with a check and a smile offering to support the fundraiser, but Zora wasn't buying it. She stepped off the stage, her sandals soft on the hardwood, and made her way to him, her heart drumming a warning. The hub was packed. Lena, her best friend, was tuning her guitar for the next performance, while Trey, Lena's brother, and a community organizer worked the crowd, rallying donations. Zora stopped inches from Malachi. Her arms crossed Mr. Reed. She said, her voice cool but sharp, "Didn't expect a suit like you at a place like this." His lips curved a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Call me Malachi," he said, his voice a low drawl, warm like bourbon, but edged with something she couldn't place. "I'm here to help Miss Ellison. Your hub's got heart. I admire that." "Admire it from a distance," she said, her eyes narrowing. "We don't need your kind of help, not when your company's eyeing our land." The air between them crackled, the crowd's laughter fading to a hum. Malachi straightened his gaze steady. "You've got me wrong, Zora. I'm offering a partnership. Work with me on a project art for my new community center. It could bring funds to keep this place running." She laughed, a sound more fire than mirth. "A community center? You mean condos with a fancy name? I know your game, Malachi. You tear down our history to build your empire." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "You don't know my game. Give me a chance to prove it." Zora stepped closer, her scarf catching the light, her voice low. "I don't trust men who come bearing gifts, especially when they've got a wrecking ball in their back pocket." Before he could respond, Lena slid between them, her braids swinging her guitar slung over her shoulder. "Zora, you good?" she asked, her eyes flicking to Malachi with a glare that could curdle milk. "This guy bothering you, I'm handling it," Zora said, her gaze never leaving Malachi. Mr. Reed was just leaving Malachi, held her stare. His eyes a mix of challenge and something deeper regret, maybe. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not until you hear me out." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check, sliding it onto a nearby table. The number was bold enough to cover the hub's rent for months. "Think about it, Zora. For your kids, for Malene." Her breath caught at her mother's name. How did he know? She grabbed the check, her fingers brushing his, and felt a jolt. Not attraction, but a warning. "You don't get to use her name," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "This isn't a deal. It's a fight." She turned the crowd parting as she stormed to the back of the hub where Trey was sorting donation jars. His shaved head gleamed under the lights, his no-nonsense vibe a steady anchor. "Zora, what's up?" he asked, catching her expression. "That Reed guy trouble? He's offering money," she said, slamming the check down. "But he's after our land." "Trey, I can feel it." Trey scanned the check, his brow furrowing. "This is big, Zora. Could keep the hub afloat. But you're right. Nobody gives this much without strings. I'll dig into Reed Ventures, see what he's hiding." "Do it," she said, her hands clenching. "And check his family. Something's off about him." Across the room, Malachi watched her, his bourbon untouched on the table. Zora was a force bold, unyielding with a fire that made his plans feel like ash. He'd come to sweet Auburn to rebuild, to bury the pain of his mother's death. She'd been a painter, her dreams crushed by a scandal tied to Malene Ellison, Zora's mother, who'd worked for his father's firm. The affair had broken his family, and when his mother took her own life, Malachi had vowed to reclaim what was lost. Buying sweet Auburn's land was supposed to be his triumph, a way to erase Malene's legacy. But Zora wasn't just a name on a deed. She was a woman who could undo him. Jasmine, Zora's cousin, approached him, her braided crown adorned with cowrie shells, her eyes sharp. A Gullah artist who'd seen too many developers promise salvation. She wasn't here for pleasantries. "You're stirring up trouble." "Reed," she said, her voice low. "Zora's. Our heart. You hurt her. You hurt us all." "I'm not here to hurt anyone," Malachi said. But the words felt hollow. He glanced at Zora, her silhouette framed by a mural of Gullah ancestors, and felt a pang. This wasn't just business. It was personal. Zora slipped into the hub's art room, needing space. The walls were a gallery of her students' work. Bright canvases of Lowcountry marshes, hands weaving sweetgrass faces of forgotten heroes. She traced a painting, her fingers smudging the red clay tones, and thought of Malene, her coughs echoing through their small apartment. The hub was all Zora had left to fight for, but Malachi's offer was a lifeline she couldn't ignore. Yet his eyes held a shadow, and his mention of Malene wasn't a coincidence. The door creaked, and Lena peeked in her guitar case in hand. "Girl, you look like you're about to burn this place down," she said, her voice soft but firm. "What's Reed's deal?" "He's trouble," Zora said, sinking into a chair. "He knows about Mama, and he's offering too much money. It's a trap." Lena nodded, her braids catching the light. "Trey's on it." "But Zora, you're drowning with those bills. Maybe hear him out. Just don't sign anything." Zora exhaled, her fingers twisting the scarf at her neck. "I don't trust him, Lena. Not with the hub, not with us." "Then trust yourself," Lena said, squeezing her shoulder. "You're Zora Neale Ellison. You don't bend." Zora managed a small smile, but as she glanced at the mural, a woman with eyes like her mother's holding a basket of stars, doubt crept in. Malachi Reed was a storm on her horizon, and she wasn't sure if she could weather him. Outside, Malachi stood under the oak-lined street, the fundraiser's music fading behind him. The check was a gamble, a way to get close to Zora, to unravel the Ellison legacy. But her poem, her fire had shaken him. He wanted the land, yes, but he wanted her respect more. And that was a problem. His phone buzzed, his assistant warning of a rival investor sniffing around. Sweet Auburn Marcus Duval, a name that carried venom, was circling. If Malachi didn't act fast, everything could slip away. But as he looked back at the hub, Zora's voice echoing in his mind, he knew one thing: this fight was just beginning. Hey, Soul Stories family. Did Zora's fire and Malachi's shadow spark your soul? Sweet Auburn's alive with history, and this story's just heating up. Subscribe, drop your favorite mural idea in the comments, and tell us where you're vibing from. Let's see where this fight for legacy takes us next. The French Quarter hummed under a velvet New Orleans night, not with the raucous chaos of Mardi Gras, but with the warm pulse of a Gullah cultural festival. Lanterns hung from wrought iron balconies, casting pools of amber light across cobblestone streets. Stalls lined the square, their tables heavy with sweetgrass baskets, red clay pottery, and bowls of steaming gumbo, the air thick with the scent of okra and smoked sausage. A Zydeco band played on a small stage, the accordion's wail weaving through the laughter of families and the soft clink of beads. This wasn't the neon-soaked haze of a jazz club or a shadowed alley. It was a celebration of roots, a reclaiming of history under the stars. Zora Neale Ellison stood at the edge of a workshop tent, her linen dress a deep indigo patterned with Gullah symbols swaying in the breeze. Her curls were loose, framed by a head wrap woven with cowrie shells, and her hands were stained with clay from setting up a pottery station. At 28, she was a woman stretched thin, her mother, Malene's worsening heart condition, a constant weight. The Sweet Auburn Cultural Hub's survival, a fight she couldn't lose. She'd come to New Orleans at the urging of her cousin Jasmine, who'd organized the festival to raise funds for Gullah preservation. But the real reason Zora was here stood across the square, his presence like a shadow on her canvas. Malachi Reed. 2 weeks had passed since their clash at the Sweet Auburn fundraiser, when Malachi's check and smooth words had sparked her suspicion. She'd reluctantly agreed to his proposal, not out of trust, but necessity. The hub's rent was due, Malene's hospital bills were piling up, and his offer to fund the hub in exchange for her art expertise was a lifeline she couldn't ignore. He wanted her to design murals for his so-called community center in Atlanta. But Zora knew better. His company, Reed Ventures, was buying up Sweet Auburn land, and this project smelled like a gentrified trap. Tonight, he'd insisted on joining her in New Orleans, claiming it was a chance to understand her vision. She wasn't buying it, but she'd play along for now. Zora adjusted a clay pot on the workshop table, her fingers tracing its curves when she felt him approach. Malachi moved with a quiet confidence, his linen shirt open at the collar, his deep brown eyes catching the lantern light. He carried a sketchbook, an odd choice for a man whose world was contracts and bulldozers. The festival crowd swirled around them, kids painting at easels, elders sharing stories of Lowcountry tides, but his focus was on her, steady and unnerving. "Ms. Ellison," he said, his voice a warm rumble like the Zydeco's low notes. "This place suits you." She didn't look up, her hands busy shaping clay. "It's Zora," she said, her tone clipped. "And don't flatter me, Malachi. You're here for your project, not my soul." He chuckled, a sound that stirred the air between them. "Maybe I'm here for both." He set the sketchbook on the table, its pages open to a rough drawing of a mural, hands weaving sweetgrass framed by oak branches. "Thought you might like to see my ideas." Zora glanced at the sketch, her brow arching. It wasn't half bad, but she wasn't here to stroke his ego. "Pretty lines," she said, pushing the book back. "But murals don't save neighborhoods. You want my help?" Tell me why Reed Ventures is buying up sweet Auburn." His smile faded, his jaw tightening. "It's business. Zora, progress. But I'm not the enemy you think I am. Progress." She set the clay down, her voice rising just enough to draw eyes from nearby stalls. "You call condos and coffee shops progress. That's erasure, Malachi. My kids paint their ancestors on those walls. You can't put a price on that." The Zydeco band shifted to a slower tune, the accordion's cry softening the tension. Malachi leaned closer, his voice low. "I'm not pricing your history. I'm trying to build something with it. Work with me, Zora. Let me show you." She crossed her arms, her head wraps, shells glinting. "Show me what a contract with my name on a dotted line." "Show you who I am," he said, his eyes holding hers, a flicker of something raw vulnerability, maybe breaking through his calm. "Start with this." He gestured to the workshop tent where a group of kids waited for their painting lesson. "Teach me. Let me learn." Zora hesitated, her instinct screaming to walk away. Lena's warning from Atlanta echoed. "He's a snake in linen, girl." But the hub's flickering lights, Maline's labored breaths, and the kids' eager faces anchored her. She nodded sharp and reluctant. "Fine, but you follow my lead." The workshop began, the tent filled with the hum of creativity. Zora guided the kids through painting. Gullah ancestors, her voice steady as she spoke of rice fields and starlit escapes. Malachi joined them, his hands awkward but earnest as he dipped a brush in red clay paint. The kids giggled at his clumsy strokes, and Zora caught herself watching him. His brow furrowed, his fingers smudged a man out of his element but trying. She handed him a canvas, their fingers brushing, and the air shifted not with heat, but with a quiet understanding. "Like this," she said, guiding his hand to blend the paint. Her touch, firm but gentle. The canvas bloomed with color, hands holding stars, a nod to her poem from Atlanta. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the festival faded, leaving only the rhythm of their shared strokes. "You're good at this," he said, his voice soft, not charming but genuine. "Not just painting, teaching, keeping it alive." She pulled back her guard, snapping up. "Don't act like you get it, Malachi. You're here for a deal, not a legacy." He set the brush down, his gaze steady. "My mother was a painter. She tried to keep her stories alive too, but she lost them. I don't want that for your kids." Zora's breath caught. His mother. The vulnerability in his voice was a crack in his armor, but she wasn't ready to trust it. Before she could respond, Jasmine stormed into the tent, her braided crown glistening with sweat, her eyes blazing. "Zora, we've got a problem," she said, her voice low but urgent. She glanced at Malachi, her distrust clear. "Trey just called Reed Ventures, filed permits for Sweet Auburn. They're moving faster than we thought." Zora's heart sank, her eyes snapping to Malachi. "Permits," she said, her voice sharp. "You said this was a partnership." "It is," he said, standing, his hands raised. "I didn't file anything. My team handles permits, but I'll stop it. I swear. Swear." Zora stepped closer, her voice ablade. "You come here with your sketches and your sad stories, but you're still tearing us down." Jasmine grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Zora, don't let him play you. Trey's digging deeper, but there's more. Someone else is pushing this Marcus Duval. He's been sniffing around meeting with your board." "Malachi." Malachi's face darkened, his voice a low growl. "Duval?" The name carried weight, a ghost from his past. He's a vulture. If he's involved, it's not just about land. Zora's mind raced Marcus. Duval, a name she'd heard in whispers, a rival investor with a reputation for ruining communities. But Malachi's reaction wasn't fake. It was personal. She turned to Jasmine, her voice firm. "Get Trey on the phone. I want everything he's got on Duval and Reed Ventures." Jasmine nodded, shooting Malachi a warning look before stepping out. The Zydeco band played on the festival's warmth, a stark contrast to the chill in Zora's chest. She faced Malachi, her eyes searching his. "You want me to trust you?" she said. "Prove it. Stop those permits. And tell me why Duval's name makes you flinch." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair, the paint smudged on his knuckles. "Duval knew my mother," he said, his voice rough. "He was there when she fell apart. If he's after Sweet Auburn, it's not just business. It's revenge." Zora's throat tightened. Revenge. The word echoed her own fears for the hub, for Malene, for the kids whose paintings lined the tent. She wanted to push him away, to call him a liar, but the pain in his eyes was real. "You've got one chance, Malachi," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "Don't waste it." She turned to the kids, her smile forced as she helped them finish their canvases. But her mind was a storm. Malachi's mother, Duval's shadow, the hub's fragile future. It was all connected, and she was caught in the center. The lantern light flickered, casting her shadow long and sharp. A woman fighting for her roots against a tide she couldn't see. Malachi watched her, the Zydeco's rhythm syncing with his pulse. Zora was more than a challenge. She was a mirror reflecting the man he could be, not the one he'd become. He'd come to New Orleans to win her trust, to secure the land, but her fire was rewriting his plans. Duval's name was a blade cutting open old wounds. His mother's paintings, her broken dreams were tied to Malene Ellison's past, and Duval knew it. If Zora found out before he could explain, everything would burn. His phone buzzed a text from his assistant. "Duval's meeting investors tomorrow. He's pushing to outbid us. Watch your back." Malachi's jaw clenched. He glanced at Zora, her hands guiding a child's brush, her face a mix of strength and worry. He'd promised to stop the permits, but Duval was a step ahead. This wasn't just a deal anymore. It was a reckoning. The festival spun on the lanterns glowing, the gumbo steaming, but Zora felt the weight of eyes, Malachi's, the crowds, and something darker lurking beyond the square. She touched the cowrie shells in her head wrap, a silent prayer to her ancestors. Whatever Malachi was hiding, whatever Duval was planning, she'd fight for Sweet Auburn, with paint, with words, with everything she had. The Gullah Cultural Center in Savannah stood like a beacon on the city's edge, its clay-red walls glowing under the soft light of dusk. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sweetgrass and acrylic paint, the walls alive with murals of Lowcountry marshes, woven baskets and ancestral faces. Tonight, the center buzzed with anticipation for its annual art exhibition, a showcase of children's paintings that told the story of Gullah resilience. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm shadows across tables laden with cornbread, fried okra, and pitchers of sweet tea. The hum of voices, elders, families, and local artists filled the space, a chorus of pride and defiance. This wasn't a stormy park or a sterile conference hall. It was a sanctuary, a place where history breathed and fought to survive. Zora Neale Ellison, 28, stood at the center of it all, her linen dress, a deep ochre that mirrored the Savannah soil, her curls framed by a head wrap adorned with tiny shells. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted a child's canvas on an easel, her heart heavy with the fight to save this place. The Sweet Auburn cultural hub was safe for now, thanks to Malachi Reed's promise to halt his company's permits, but Savannah's center was under threat. Trey's research had uncovered a chilling truth. Reed Ventures wasn't the only player. Marcus Duval, a rival investor with a venomous grudge, was pulling strings, buying up land and swaying city officials to shut the center down. Zora's mother, Malene, was fading faster, her heart condition, a ticking clock, And the weight of it all, Bills. History. Hope pressed against Zora's chest like a stone. She'd come to Savannah a month ago after the New Orleans festival to help her cousin Jasmine prepare for the exhibition. Malachi had followed his presence, a constant tension. Their shared moment in New Orleans painting together, hands brushing over a canvas of gullah stars, had cracked her defenses, but his secrets kept her wary. He'd sworn to stop the permits to prove he wasn't the enemy, but Trey's latest call had shaken her. A contract from decades ago linking Malene to Malachi's father hinted at a deeper betrayal. Had Malene been part of a deal that cost Malachi's mother her dreams? Zora needed answers, and tonight, with the community watching, she'd demand them. The exhibition began, the room filling with murmurs as kids presented their paintings. Zora took the stage, her voice steady as she introduced a special piece, a mural she'd painted with Malachi and the children, a tapestry of hands holding stars, oak branches and tidal waves. "This is our story," she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "Not just Gullah, but all of us who fight for our roots." Her gaze landed on Malachi, who stood near the back, his linen shirt smudged with paint, his deep brown eyes unreadable. He'd helped hang the mural, his hands steady, but his silence heavy. She wanted to trust him, but the contract's shadow loomed. As applause filled the room, Zora stepped down, her heart pounding. She was about to confront Malachi when Jasmine rushed to her side, her braided crown glistening, her voice low. "Zora, Trey's here. He found something big about Malene and Malachi's father. You need to see this." Before Zora could respond, the crowd parted, and Marcus Duval strode in his tailored suit, stark against the center's warmth. His smile was slick, his eyes cold, a predator in a room of dreamers. Whispers followed him. Duval was no stranger to Savannah, his name tied to shuttered community centers and displaced families. He clapped slowly, drawing eyes, and Zora's stomach twisted. "Beautiful work. Miss Ellison," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "A shame it's on borrowed time." The room went quiet, the lanterns flickering. Zora stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This center's not yours to take, Duval. Our kids, our history. They're not for sale." Duval's smile widened his gaze, flicking to Malachi. "Ask your friend Reed about that. His family's been selling out communities for years. Isn't that right?" "Malachi?" Malachi's jaw clenched, his hands fisting at his sides. "You're out of line, Marcus," he said, his voice a low growl. "This isn't your fight, isn't it?" Duval said, stepping closer, his voice a blade. "Your father ruined my family. Malachi and Malene Ellison. She was his pawn. Tell Zora the truth. Tell her how her mother helped destroy your mother's dreams." Zora's breath caught her eyes, snapping to Malachi. The crowd murmured tension thick as the humid air. Trey pushed through his shaved head, gleaming a folder in hand. "Zora, wait," he said, his voice urgent. "It's not what Duval's saying." Malene was coerced. Malachi's father used her to sabotage his own wife's art career. Duval's twisting it to hurt you both. Zora grabbed the folder, her hands shaking as she scanned the pages. A contract from 30 years ago. Malene's signature on a deal to manage Malachi's father's properties. A deal that funneled money away from his mother's gallery. Letters followed Malene's handwriting, pleading for forgiveness, offering to fund the gallery, but rejected Zora's. Chest tightened. Her mother, a pawn in a rich man's game, had carried that guilt to her sickbed. She turned to Malachi, her voice trembling but fierce. "Did you know?" she asked, holding up the folder. "Did you come to sweet Auburn to punish her? To punish me?" Malachi's face paled, his eyes raw with pain. "Zora, I knew about Malene. Yes, I thought she betrayed my mother. But I didn't know the whole story. Not until now. He stepped closer. The crowd watching his voice breaking. I came to take the land to erase her name. But you changed everything. I'm not that man anymore. Duval laughed, a sound that grated her nerves. He's lying. Zora, he's a Reed. They build empires on broken promises. Sell me the center, and I'll make sure your mother's bills are paid. Zora's hands clenched, her head wraps shells glinting as she faced Duval. You think you can buy our soul, she said, her voice rising, echoing off the murals. She turned to the crowd, her heart pounding. This center is ours. Our kids painted these walls. Our elders wove these baskets, and we're not giving it up. She grabbed a microphone, her voice a fire that lit the room. Let me tell you a story, she said, launching into a spoken word poem, each line a blade. From rice fields to red clay, we stand, we weave, we rise. They come with contracts, with lies, but our roots run deeper than their greed. Her words wove through the crowd, elders nodding, kids cheering the murals, seeming to glow brighter. She pointed to the mural she'd painted with Malachi, its stars a beacon. This is our truth, and no one, not Duval, not anyone can take it. The crowd erupted their applause, a thunderclap. Duval's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing, but Zora wasn't done. She turned to Malachi, her voice softer but no less fierce. You say you're different. Prove it. Right now. Malachi stepped forward, the weight of every eye on him. He took the microphone, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I was wrong, he said, his gaze locked on Zora. My mother was a painter like Zora. She lost her way, and I blamed Meline. But I see it now. She was a victim, just like my mother. I'm stopping the permits, and I'm giving this land back to the center, free and clear. Gasps rippled through the room. Zora's heart stuttered, her eyes searching his. Was this real? Duval's face twisted, his voice sharp. You're throwing away your legacy, Reed, for what? Her for what's right. Malachi said, his voice steel. He turned to Zora, his eyes soft but resolute. For you. For them. He nodded to the kids, their paintings, a testament to the future. Zora's throat tightened, her guard, wavering. She wanted to believe him, but Duval's presence was a poison. Before she could respond, Jasmine took the stage, her voice clear. We've got proof, she said, holding up Trey's folder. Duval's been rigging deals, bribing officials. This center's safe, and he's finished. The crowd cheered, but Duval's smile returned cold and calculated. This isn't over, he said, his eyes flicking between Zora and Malachi. You'll regret this. He slipped out his shadow, lingering like a storm on the horizon. Zora faced Malachi, the microphone still in her hand, the crowd's energy pulsing around them. You meant that she asked, her voice low, for him alone. The land, the center, all of it. He nodded, stepping closer, his paint-smudged hands open. I meant every word. Zora, I'm not my father, and I'm not Duval. She studied him, the murals behind them, a canvas of their shared fight. Slowly she extended her hand, not in romance, but in partnership. He took it, his grip warm and steady, and the crowd cheered again. A wave of hope washing over the room. The lanterns glowed brighter, the sweetgrass scent stronger, and for the first time Zora felt the tide turning. But as she looked at the door where Duval had vanished, a chill settled in her bones. This victory was hers, but the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The Blue Ridge Mountains cradled Asheville in a golden embrace. Their peaks dappled with the first blush of autumn. The air was crisp, scented with pine sweetgrass, and the warm tang of peach cobbler baking in a nearby kitchen. Inside a converted barn, turned community arts center laughter echoed off wooden beams, mingling with the soft strum of a bluegrass guitar and the squeak of paintbrushes on canvas. Murals of Gullah ancestors' hands, weaving baskets, faces lit by Lowcountry stars adorn the walls, their colors vibrant against the barn's weathered grain. This wasn't a sterile courthouse or a neon-lit conference hall. It was a living canvas, a testament to a community's roots and resilience. Tonight, the center's grand opening celebrated a new chapter, one forged in fight and painted in hope. Zora Neale Ellison, 28, stood at the heart of the barn, her linen dress a soft amber that caught the lantern light, her curls loose and glowing under a head wrap woven with Gullah patterns, her hands still flecked with paint, adjusted a child's painting on an easel, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The sweet Auburn cultural hub was thriving, its land secured. The Gullah Cultural Center in Savannah stood strong, its murals a beacon for generations. Her mother Malene was stable, her heart condition managed with funds from the community's efforts, and Zora felt for the first time like she could breathe. But the scars of the fight, Marcus Duval's schemes, Malachi Reed's secrets, lingered, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing it all. 3 months had passed since the exhibition in Savannah, where Zora's poem and Malachi's stand had turned the tide against Duval. Malachi had kept his promise, deeding the land back to the Savannah Center and halting Reed Ventures permits in sweet Auburn. Trey's evidence contracts exposing Duval's bribes and fraudulent deals had stripped the investor of influence, his plans for condos and hotels crumbling under legal scrutiny. But Zora knew men like Duval didn't vanish quietly, and Malachi's past, tied to Malene's coerced role in his family's ruin, still cast a shadow. Tonight in Asheville they'd close that chapter, not with a wedding or a public takedown, but with a shared vision of art and legacy. The barn was alive with community kids darting between easels, elders sharing stories of Gullah tides and volunteers setting out trays of cornbread and fried okra. Lena was on a small stage, her braids swinging as she strummed a Gullah song, her voice a warm thread weaving the crowd together. Jasmine, Zora's cousin, hung a new mural, a vibrant tapestry of their journey, hands holding stars over red clay fields, while Trey, his lawyer's briefcase replaced by a tray of sweet tea, rallied support for the center's programs. The air buzzed with purpose, a stark contrast to the storms of Savannah or the suspicions of New Orleans. Zora felt him before she saw him. Malachi Reed stepped into the barn, his linen shirt rolled at the sleeves, his deep brown eyes softened by the lantern glow. He was different now, less the developer driven by vengeance, more the man who'd painted with her in New Orleans, who'd stood with her in Savannah. He carried a canvas under his arm, its edges smudged with clay-red paint, and his crooked smile was a quiet promise. "Zora," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the bluegrass hum. "You've built something real here." She smiled, her guard down, but her fire intact. "We built it," she corrected, nodding to the murals, the kids, the community. "But don't get too comfortable, Malachi. I'm still watching you," he chuckled, a sound that warmed her more than she'd admit. Wouldn't have it any other way. Before she could respond, Lena hopped off the stage, her guitar slung over her shoulder. "Y'all playing nice?" she asked, her eyes flicking to Malachi with a playful glare. "'Cause I'm not singing at no trouble, Zora." "No trouble, Zora," said laughing. "Just making sure Malachi's keeping his promises." Lena winked, but her voice softened. "He's doing all right. For now." She nodded to the canvas in Malachi's hands. "What's that? Reed, you turning artist on us?" Malachi set the canvas on an easel, revealing a painting, hands weaving sweetgrass framed by oak branches, a mirror of the mural they'd created in Savannah. "For the center," he set his gaze on Zora, "and for you, a reminder of what we're fighting for." Zora's throat tightened, her fingers tracing the painted stars. It wasn't just art. It was a vow, a bridge between their past and their future. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But it's not enough." "You're funding this place, right?" He nodded, his smile widening. "Already done. Reed Ventures is out of real estate. I'm putting everything into centers like this. Sweet Auburn, Savannah here. For the kids, for the stories." The crowd murmured, heads turning as his words spread. Trey stepped forward, his face warm but serious. "He's legit." "Zora," he said, holding up a legal document. "Signed today. The Asheville Center's fully funded, and Duval's deals are dead. We got him." Zora's heart lifted, but a shadow lingered. Duval's final threat in Savannah, "This isn't over," echoed in her mind. She glanced at Malachi, searching his eyes. "What about him?" she asked. "Duval's not the type to quit." Malachi's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm. "He's finished. Trey's evidence went to the city council. Duval's lost his investors, his permits, everything. But if he comes back, we'll face him. Together." The word "together" hung between them. A quiet shift. Zora nodded her hand, brushing his as she adjusted the canvas, a touch that wasn't romance but partnership, trust, earned through fire. The crowd cheered, but it was Jasmine who sealed the moment, taking the stage with a spoken word, piece of her own, her voice rising like a tide. "From clay to canvas we weave, we rise, we hold," she said, her braids catching the light. "This is our home, and we ain't letting go." The barn erupted, kids clapping, elders raising glasses of sweet tea. Zora and Malachi stood side by side, their shoulders touching as they helped a group of children hang their paintings. The bluegrass guitar wove through the laughter, the murals glowing under the lanterns. Zora felt Malene's presence in the air, her mother's strength in every brushstroke, every story, the fight for sweet Auburn, for Savannah, for Asheville. It wasn't just hers, it was theirs, but peace was never certain. A letter arrived that morning, slipped under the barn's door, its words chilling. "You won this round. Ellison, but roots can burn, no signature." But Zora knew Duval's hand. She hadn't shown it to Malachi, not yet, but as she caught his eye, his steady gaze a mirror of her own resolve, she knew they'd face it. Not as enemies, not as lovers, but as builders of something stronger. They stepped outside the mountains, stretching before them, their peaks silver under a rising moon. The kids' laughter spilled from the barn. Lena's guitar, a soft hum. Zora touched the shells in her head wrap, a prayer to her ancestors, and turned to Malachi. "This is just the start," she said, her voice fierce but warm. "We've got more stories to paint." He nodded, his hand brushing hers, not grasping but present. "And I'm here for everyone," he said, his eyes bright with purpose. "You're my home, Zora." She smiled. Not a promise, but a possibility. "Keep up, Malachi. We've got work to do." The stars above the blue ridge burned bright, a canvas yet to be filled. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a choice forged in clay, tempered by truth. They'd fought for their roots, and they'd fight again side by side, painting a legacy that no one could erase. The Lowcountry sun dipped below the horizon, painting the marshes of St. Helena Island, South Carolina, in hues of amber and indigo. The air was heavy with the scent of salt sweetgrass and the faint smoke of a communal bonfire crackling near the Penn Center, a historic hub of Gullah culture. The center's wooden porch creaked under the weight of gathered families, their voices rising in a Gullah spiritual, the words weaving through the rustle of palmetto leaves. Children darted across the grass, their hands clutching kites painted with images of ancestors, while elders sat in rocking chairs, weaving sweetgrass baskets that gleamed in the firelight. This wasn't a neon-lit city or a high-stakes conference. It was a homecoming, a celebration of roots that stretched deeper than any deed or dollar. Zora Neale Ellison, now 29, stood on the porch. Her linen skirt, a soft coral that swayed in the evening breeze. Her curls framed by a head wrap adorned with cowrie shells. Her hands no longer stained with paint, but calloused from months of building, held a small clay pot, its surface etched with Gullah stars. A year had passed since the grand opening of the Asheville Arts Center, and in that time, Zora had become a beacon for Gullah preservation. The sweet Auburn cultural hub thrived, its classes packed with kids painting their history. The Savannah Center was expanding its murals, a tourist draw that funded scholarships. And here at the Penn Center, Zora was launching a new initiative, a network of Gullah arts programs across the South, funded by Malachi Reed's foundation. Her mother, Meline, was stronger, her heart condition managed, and though the scars of their past lingered, Zora felt whole, rooted in a legacy she'd fought to save. Malachi Reed stood beside her, his linen shirt loose in the humid air, his deep brown eyes reflecting the bonfire's glow. He was a changed man, no longer the developer driven by vengeance, but a partner in Zora's vision. His foundation, born from the ashes of Reed Ventures, had poured millions into community centers, not for profit, but for pride. The pain of his mother's loss, her dreams crushed by his father's betrayal, and Meline's coerced role still lingered. But he'd found healing in the work, in the kids' laughter, in Zora's fire. Tonight, he carried a woven basket, a gift from an elder, its intricate patterns, a symbol of the trust he'd earned. The bonfire crackled as Lena took the stage, her braids swinging her guitar, strummed in a Gullah melody that hushed the crowd. "This one's for the ancestors," she said, her voice a warm tide, "and for Zora, who kept their stories alive." The crowd clapped, kids waving their kites, and Zora felt a lump in her throat. Lena had been her rock, her voice a constant through every fight, and now she was here singing for a future they'd built together. Jasmine approached, her braided crown adorned with shells, a canvas under her arm. "Zora, this is for the Penn Center," she said, unveiling a mural, hands holding kites, stars over marshlands, a tribute to their journey. "You and Malachi made this possible." Zora's eyes shimmered, her fingers tracing the painted hands. "We all did," she said, her voice soft but fierce. She glanced at Malachi, his smile quiet but proud, and felt a shift, not love in the burning, reckless way of stories, but a steady partnership, a shared route. Trey joined them, his usual lawyer's briefcase replaced by a stack of flyers for the New Arts Network. "Everything's set," he said, his shaved head gleaming, "the foundation's locked in, and the council's backing us. Duvall's gone for good." Zora's heart skipped at the name. Marcus Duvall's letter, slipped under the Asheville barn's door a year ago, had haunted her. Roots can burn, but Trey's work had buried him. Legal battles exposed fraud and a public shaming that stripped Duvall of power. His investors had fled, his permits revoked, and his name was a cautionary tale in Savannah and beyond. Yet Zora knew men like Duvall left echoes, and she'd stayed vigilant. "Gone doesn't mean forgotten," she said, her voice low. "Anything new?" Trey nodded, his face serious. "Got a tip this morning. Duvall's in hiding, but he sent a package to the Savannah Center. Empty, just a note. Watch your stars. He's taunting us, but he's got no leverage." Malachi's jaw tightened, his hand resting on the basket. "Let him try," he said, his voice steel. "He can't touch what we've built." Zora met his gaze, her resolve mirroring his. "He won't," she said, her hand brushing the clay pot, its stars a reminder of her poem in Savannah. "We're stronger than his games." The bonfire flared, casting shadows across the marsh. Lena's song swelled the spiritual's words, a prayer for protection. Jasmine hung the mural on the Penn Center's wall, its colors blending with the night. Trey handed out flyers, kids tugging at his sleeves, eager to join the arts program. The elders nodded their baskets, a testament to a culture that refused to fade. Zora and Malachi stepped to the bonfire, the crowd gathering around. She held up the clay pot, her voice clear. "This is for our ancestors," she said for Malene. For every hand that wove this legacy, she placed the pot in the fire, its clay glowing as the flames licked higher. Malachi added his basket, its sweet grass curling in the heat, a silent vow to honor his mother's dreams. The crowd cheered, kites soaring above the marsh, their painted ancestors dancing in the wind. Zora felt Malachi's presence beside her, not a lover's touch, but a partner's strength. Their hands brushed as they watched the fire, the stars above St. Helena, bright and unyielding. "We're not done," she said, her voice warm but fierce. "There's more to build." He nodded, his eyes on the kites. "And I'm here, Zora, for all of it." They turned back to the crowd, Lena's guitar a heartbeat, Jasmine's mural a promise. The Penn Center stood strong, its porch alive with stories, its future woven in sweet grass and clay. Duval's shadow was gone, but Zora knew other fights would come. She'd face them not alone, but with Malachi, with her community, with the ancestors who'd never let her fall. The marshes stretched into the night. The bonfire's glow, a star on the horizon. Zora touched her head wrap's shells. A prayer answered and smiled. This was her home, her fight, her canvas, and she'd painted for generations to come. The marshes of Beaufort, South Carolina shimmered under a late spring sun, their emerald reeds swaying in a breeze that carried the briny tang of the Atlantic. The Gullah Heritage House, a new community center, perched on the edge of a tidal creek, stood proud with its clay-red walls and wide porch, its roof adorned with sweetgrass woven by local elders. Inside, the scent of acrylic paint and cornbread mingled with the laughter of children, their voices echoing off murals that told stories of rice fields, starlit escapes, and resilient hands. A bluegrass fiddle hummed softly from a radio, blending with the distant call of gulls. This wasn't a neon-lit battlefield or a tech-driven arena. It was a living legacy, a root that had grown stronger with time. Zora Neale Ellison, now 31, stood in the center's art studio, her linen tunic of vibrant indigo splashed with Gullah patterns, her curls tied back with a head wrap threaded with tiny shells. Her hands, steady from years of teaching, guided a young girl's brush across a canvas painting, a kite soaring over a marsh. 3 years had passed since the bonfire at the Penn Center, and Zora's vision had blossomed. Her network of Gullah arts programs now spanned sweet Auburn, Savannah, Asheville, and St. Helena, with Beaufort as its newest heart. Malene, her mother, was thriving. Her heart condition stabilized, and she often visited the centers, weaving baskets with the kids. The fight for their land. Their culture had forged Zora into a leader. But the memory of Marcus Duval's threat, "Roots can burn," kept her vigilant. Malachi Reed leaned against the studio's doorway, his linen shirt loose, his deep brown eyes warm with pride. At 38, he was no longer the man haunted by his mother's loss or his father's betrayal. His foundation had grown funding, not just arts, but also Gullah land trusts, ensuring communities like Beaufort stayed in their hands. His partnership with Zora had deepened, not into the fiery romance of songs, but a quiet strength, a shared commitment to their people. He carried a sketchbook, its pages filled with designs for new murals, a habit he'd picked up from their first painting in New Orleans. The studio buzzed with activity, kids painting, volunteers setting out trays of fried okra and sweet tea, and elders sharing stories of the Sea Islands. Lena was outside teaching a group to sing a Gullah spiritual, her braids swinging as her guitar strummed. Jasmine, now running the Savannah Center, hung a new mural, a tapestry of kites and tidal waves, while Trey, ever the organizer, coordinated a workshop schedule. The air was alive with purpose, a testament to the roots they'd protected. Zora finished guiding the girl's brush and stepped back, her eyes catching Malachi's. "You're lurking again," she said, her voice teasing but warm. "Got a new mural idea, or you just here to look pretty?" He grinned, his sketchbook opening to a sketch of hands holding a marsh under a starry sky. "For the porch," he said, his voice a low hum. "Thought it could welcome folks. What do you think?" She studied the sketch, her fingers brushing the page, a familiar spark of collaboration. "It's good," she said, her smile soft. "But add some shells, make it Beaufort." He nodded, his eyes holding hers, always keeping me honest. "Zora, someone's gotta," she said, laughing, but her gaze lingered, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared path before they could continue. Trey burst into the studio, his face tense, a tablet in hand. "Zora, Malachi, we've got trouble," he said, his voice low. "Got an email from a law firm. Someone's filing a claim against the Beaufort Land Trust. Says it's tied to old debts from Reed Ventures." Zora's heart sank, her hand tightening on the paintbrush. "Debts," she said, her voice sharp. "We cleared everything. Who's behind this?" Trey swiped the tablet, revealing a name. "Carla Vance. She's a lawyer, new in Charleston," he said. "No direct link to Duval, but the timing's off. That package he sent to Savannah. Watch your stars. This feels like his shadow." Malachi's jaw clenched, his sketchbook closing with a snap. "Duval's done," he said, but his voice carried doubt. "I shut down Reed Ventures' debts years ago. This is a fishing expedition." Zora's mind raced. Duval had vanished after his legal defeats, his threats reduced to whispers, but men like him didn't fade, they schemed. Carla Vance could be a proxy, a new move in an old game. "We're not losing this place," she said, her voice fierce. "Trey, dig into Vance. Find out who's paying her." Trey nodded, already typing on the tablet. "On it. But Zora, we've got the community behind us. They can't touch this." Jasmine joined them. Her mural hung her eyes sharp. "He's right," she said, her braided crown glistening. "Beaufort's ours. Let's show them." She gestured to the kids, their canvases bright with kites and marshes. "We'll paint this fight too." Zora's resolve hardened, her hand resting on the clay pot at her side, its etched stars a reminder of Savannah's victory. She turned to Malachi, her voice steady. "You with me?" she asked. Not a challenge, but a call. "Always," he said, his hand brushing hers, not grasping, but solid. "Let's end this." The day unfolded with purpose. Zora led a workshop teaching kids to paint their vision of Beaufort's future, their brushes bold with hope. Malachi worked beside her, his sketches guiding their designs, his presence a quiet anchor. Lena's spirituals filled the air, a shield against doubt, while Jasmine and Trey rallied the elders, gathering stories to counter any legal claim. By dusk, the porch was lined with new paintings, kites soaring, hands holding land, a declaration of ownership no court could deny. As the sun set, Zora and Malachi stood on the creek's edge, the marshes glowing under a rising moon. The kids' kites danced in the distance, their colors a mirror of the murals inside. Zora touched her head wrap's shells, a prayer to her ancestors, and spoke, her voice soft but unyielding. "They'll keep coming," she said. "Vance, Duval, whoever. But we're ready." Malachi nodded, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. "We've got roots they can't touch," he said, his eyes on the marsh. "You taught me that." "Zora," she smiled. Not a promise of forever, but a shared horizon. "Keep painting, Malachi. We've got a legacy to grow." They returned to the heritage house, the bonfire's glow welcoming them. Lena's guitar strummed, Jasmine's mural shone, and Trey's tablet buzzed with new leads. The kids ran past their kites trailing stars, and the elders wove baskets, their hands a rhythm of resilience. The marshes stretched into the night, the Gullah Heritage House, a beacon its story far from over. The marshes of Beaufort, South Carolina shimmered under a late spring sun, their emerald reeds swaying in a breeze that carried the briny tang of the Atlantic. The Gullah Heritage House, a new community center perched on the edge of a tidal creek, stood proud with its clay-red walls and wide porch, its roof adorned with sweetgrass woven by local elders. Inside, the scent of acrylic paint and cornbread mingled with the laughter of children, their voices echoing off murals that told stories of rice fields, starlit escapes, and resilient hands. A bluegrass fiddle hummed softly from a radio, blending with the distant call of gulls. This wasn't a neon-lit battlefield or a tech-driven arena. It was a living legacy, a root that had grown stronger with time. Zora Neale Ellison, now 31, stood in the center's art studio, her linen tunic of vibrant indigo, splashed with Gullah patterns, her curls tied back with a head wrap threaded with tiny shells, her hands steady from years of teaching, guided a young girl's brush across a canvas painting, a kite soaring over a marsh. 3 years had passed since the bonfire at the Penn Center, and Zora's vision had blossomed. Her network of Gullah arts programs now spanned Sweet Auburn, Savannah, Asheville, and St. Helena, with Beaufort as its newest heart. Meline, her mother, was thriving. Her heart condition stabilized, and she often visited the centers weaving baskets with the kids. The fight for their land, their culture had forged Zora into a leader, but the memory of Marcus Duval's threat, "Roots can burn," kept her vigilant. Malachi Reed leaned against the studio's doorway, his linen shirt loose, his deep brown eyes warm with pride. At 38, he was no longer the man haunted by his mother's loss or his father's betrayal. His foundation had grown, funding not just arts, but also Gullah land trusts, ensuring communities like Beaufort stayed in their hands. His partnership with Zora had deepened not into the fiery romance of songs, but a quiet strength, a shared commitment to their people. He carried a sketchbook, its pages filled with designs for new murals, a habit he'd picked up from their first painting in New Orleans. The studio buzzed with activity. Kids painting volunteers, setting out trays of fried okra and sweet tea, and elders sharing stories of the sea islands. Lena was outside teaching a group to sing a Gullah spiritual, her braids swinging as her guitar strummed Jasmine, now running the Savannah Center, hung a new mural, a tapestry of kites and tidal waves, while Trey, ever the organizer, coordinated a workshop schedule. The air was alive with purpose, a testament to the roots they'd protected. Zora finished guiding the girl's brush and stepped back, her eyes catching Malachi's. "You're lurking again," she said, her voice teasing but warm. "Got a new mural idea, or you just here to look pretty?" He grinned, his sketchbook opening to a sketch of hands holding a marsh under a starry sky. "For the porch," he said, his voice a low hum. "Thought it could welcome folks. What do you think?" She studied the sketch, her fingers brushing the page, a familiar spark of collaboration. "It's good," she said, her smile soft. "But add some shells. Make it Beaufort." He nodded, his eyes holding hers. "Always keeping me honest." "Zora, someone's gotta," she said, laughing, but her gaze lingered, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared path. Before they could continue, Trey burst into the studio, his face tense, a tablet in hand. "Zora, Malachi." "We've got trouble," he said, his voice low. "Got an email from a law firm. Someone's filing a claim against the Beaufort Land Trust. Says it's tied to old debts from Reed Ventures." Zora's heart sank, her hand tightening on the paintbrush. "Debts. she said, her voice sharp. We cleared everything. Who's behind this? Trey swiped the tablet, revealing a name. Carla Vance. She's a lawyer new in Charleston, he said. No direct link to Duval, but the timing's off. That package he sent to Savannah. Watch your stars. This feels like his shadow. Malachi's jaw clenched, his sketchbook closing with a snap. Duval's done, he said, but his voice carried doubt. I shut down Reed Ventures' debts years ago. This is a fishing expedition. Zora's mind raced. Duval had vanished after his legal defeats, his threats reduced to whispers, but men like him didn't fade. They schemed Carla. Vance could be a proxy, a new move in an old game. We're not losing this place, she said, her voice fierce. Trey, dig into Vance. Find out who's paying her. Trey nodded, already typing on the tablet. On it. But Zora, we've got the community behind us. They can't touch this. Jasmine joined them. Her mural hung, her eyes sharp. He's right, she said, her braided crown glistening. Beaufort's ours. Let's show them. She gestured to the kids, their canvases bright with kites and marshes. We'll paint this fight too. Zora's resolve hardened her hand, resting on the clay pot at her side, its etched stars a reminder of Savannah's victory. She turned to Malachi, her voice steady. You with me? She asked. Not a challenge, but a call. Always, he said, his hand brushing hers, not grasping, but solid. Let's end this. The day unfolded with purpose. Zora led a workshop teaching kids to paint their vision of Beaufort's future, their brushes bold with hope. Malachi worked beside her, his sketches guiding their designs, his presence, a quiet anchor. Lena's spirituals filled the air, a shield against doubt, while Jasmine and Trey rallied the elders, gathering stories to counter any legal claim. By dusk, the porch was lined with new paintings, kites soaring, hands holding land, a declaration of ownership no court could deny. As the sun set, Zora and Malachi stood on the creek's edge, the marshes glowing under a rising moon. The kids' kites danced in the distance, their colors a mirror of the murals inside. Zora touched her head-wrap shells, a prayer to her ancestors, and spoke, her voice soft but unyielding. They'll keep coming, she said. Vance, Duval, whoever. But we're ready. Malachi nodded, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. We've got roots they can't touch, he said, his eyes on the marsh. You taught me that, Zora. She smiled. Not a promise of forever, but a shared horizon. Keep painting, Malachi. We've got a legacy to grow. They returned to the Heritage House, the bonfire's glow welcoming them. Lena's guitar strummed, Jasmine's mural shone, and Trey's tablet buzzed with new leads. The kids ran past their kites, trailing stars, and the elders wove baskets, their hands a rhythm of resilience. The marshes stretched into the night, the Gullah Heritage House, a beacon, its story far from over. Hey, Soul Stories family. Did Zora and Malachi's fight for Beaufort's roots spark your heart? The marshes are alive, and the legacy grows. Subscribe, share your favorite Gullah kite design in the comments, and tell us where you're dreaming from. Let's keep the story weaving.